Welcome to this video. We're going to start by reading from the book of Exodus, chapter 3, verse 7 and 8. And the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people that are in Egypt, and have heard their cry by reason of their taskmasters, for I know their pains. And I am come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that land unto a good land and a large, unto a land flowing with milk and honey, unto the place of the Canaanites, and the Hittites, and the Amorites, and the Perizzite, and the Hivite, and the Jebusite. Recently, we've been doing a recap on this channel, and we haven't spoken about Canaan, son of Ham. You may or may not be aware that there are different theories out there about where is the Holy Land. And as we read here in verse 8, it says, unto the place of the Canaanites. So because these peoples, these tribes, these Canaanites were in the Holy Land, it became known as the land of Canaan. So we can think about it as the Holy Land or the land of Canaan. But why are there different theories out there about the land of Canaan? Where is it? So what we're going to do is go in depth on Canaan, son of Ham, to think about all the things that we've covered and we've learnt about, and will that shed a light on the land of Canaan? This is the Wikipedia entry for Canaan, son of Ham. Let's read from this part. According to the Table of Nations in Genesis 10, Canaan was the ancestor of the tribes who originally occupied the ancient land of Canaan. So we've mentioned that. And the Bible tells us of 11 nations or 11 sons from Canaan. We're going to start with the Sinites. We did a very interesting video called Sinim, son of Canaan, the Isaiah 49 prophecy, land of Sinim and China. Does the prophecy from Isaiah 49 refer to worshippers coming from China? We're going to go into a little bit more detail or elaborate a little bit more than we did in that video. Let's read from the book of Isaiah, chapter 49, and we're going to read from, let's read from verse 5. And now saith the Lord that formed me from the womb to be his servant, to bring Jacob again to him. Though Israel be not gathered, yet shall I be glorious in the eyes of the Lord, and my God shall be my strength. And he said, it is a light thing that thou shouldest be my servant to raise up the tribes of Jacob, and to restore the preserved of Israel. I will also give thee for a light to the Gentiles, that thou mayest be my salvation unto the end of the earth. So what is this speaking about? If we go to the New Testament, we can learn that it's referring to Jesus, because Jesus says here in the book of John, let me just show you the book. So John chapter 10, it says, I am the good shepherd, and know my sheep, and am known of mine. As the Father knoweth me, even so know I the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. And other sheep I have, which are not of this fold, them also I must bring, and they shall hear my voice, and there shall be one fold and one shepherd. So Jesus is the good shepherd, but it's saying that he's not just going to be the shepherd of Jacob and Israel, which is what's speaking about here in the book of Isaiah, because it's saying that this is a light thing. It's not enough. He's also going to be given as a light to the Gentiles. So then that means there's going to be other sheep which are not of the fold of Jacob or Israel. So it's very interesting that if we go a bit further down in the book of Isaiah, it says, behold, these shall come from far, and lo, these from the north and from the west, and these from the land of Sinim. Now, not all Bibles translate this in the same way. So there are different Bibles that will give a different translation, but there have been researchers and scholars who have asked the question, is this referring to China? So Sini, the Sinites of Canaan. So that's what we spoke about in this video. It's a short video if you'd like to watch it. Before we speak more about China, there could be a very important reference here to where we should be looking for the Holy Land or the land of Canaan. But we haven't given any reasons for why we would be entertaining different theories or locations for the Holy Land. So there's a map given here for the modern day country of Lebanon, or the modern day land of Israel and Lebanon. And if we go back to the verses that we used to introduce the video, it said that the Israelites were being brought to a good land, but a large land. So we should be looking for a large land according to the Bible. Does this region qualify as a large land? That's just one example of something that we can read from the Bible and then look with our eyes. Does it make sense? Does it match up? So we should be looking for a large land. But then if we read this verse again from the book of Isaiah and think about the directions of where the followers or the worshippers are going to be coming from. So, behold, these shall come from far, and lo, these from the north, and from the west, and these from the land of Sinim. So if we are right to interpret the land of Sinim as being China, and we know China being to the east, to the far east. So it's three directions that you can see this as, that the followers will be coming from three directions, from the north, from the west, and from the east. So the only direction that's not mentioned is the south. So is that not saying that we should be looking for a large land in the south? That's where the followers or the worshippers are going to be coming to. So that's very, it can be quite revealing, this verse, for where should we be looking for the Holy Land. This map is showing the percentage of Christians by country. And we're looking at this map thinking about the verses that we've already read, that this light, the salvation, is going to go out to the end of the earth, and that Jesus has other sheep, not just Jacob and Israel. So very important, this map. And when I was researching for this video, I noticed people referring to China as the most atheist country in the world. So this is quite fascinating, because what's behind the boom of Christianity in China? This is what we referred to in this video. So it says, over the past 4 decades, Christianity has grown faster in China than anywhere else in the world. And it speaks about the growth of the Christian community from 1 million to 100 million. And if we go to this table, now this is 2010, so it's 14 years out of date. So a lot may have changed, or a lot has changed since then. But we see here China in the rank of 7 for the amount of Christians. And now it's saying that it could be over 100 million if these stats were up to date. So where would China be on the list as of today? So I think that's very fascinating, that you can almost see this as two stories. You could look at China, and some may say it's the most atheist country in the world. But it also could be seen as that it's becoming one of the most important Christian nations in the world, with a large amount of Christians worshipping in this region. So is that what is foreseen in this prophecy of Isaiah, that there's going to be worshippers coming from the land of Sinim? So very fascinating for Bible prophecy and for the end times. So we're going to speak about this map at the end of the video as well. in this part, we're going to be speaking about the children of Heth, the Hittites, but also indirectly mentioning the Hivites. We also need to say something about the Sinites that we forgot to mention so that this video can make sense on its own. So we're still in the region of the Far East. Now we're going to mention the Liao dynasty, the Khitans. If we read this paragraph, it says, due to the dominance of the Khitans during the Liao dynasty in Manchuria and Mongolia, and later the Kara Khitai in Central Asia where they were seen as Chinese, the term Khitai came to mean China to people near them in Central Asia, Russia, and northwestern China. The name was then introduced to medieval Europe via Islamic and Russian sources and became Khitai. So China, also known as Khitai. But how does this potentially relate to the Hittites? We've used this source in the past, the Hittites, the story of the forgotten empire. It says, the decipherment of the inscriptions of Egypt and Assyria has thrown a new light upon their origin and history, and shown that the race to which they belonged once played a leading part in the history of the civilized East. On the Egyptian monuments they are called Quetzal, or better, Kata. On those of Assyria, Kata. Not sure about this one, but maybe Kate, which does sound very similar to Kate, one of the names for China. Both words being exact equivalents of the Hebrew Keth, or kitty. So this is why scholars have asked about this kingdom or this empire of the Khitans. Is it connected to the Hittites, with the Egyptians calling the Hittites the Kheta? And if you would like to learn more about this, search for Professor John Campbell. We looked at his theory of this great Khitan language family, even potentially spreading to Japan. Now, the other name for China that we need to speak about, which is important for what we were saying about Sinim and the Sinites, Sini, son of Canaan. The term Sino is derived from the Latin word Sine, which was used by ancient Roman and Greek writers to refer to the people of China. Over time, Sine evolved into Sino as a prefix in English and other languages, and it has come to be associated with things related to China. So if we just speak about an example of this, when China was fighting the war against Japan, it would have been known as the Sino-Japanese War, with Sino referring to China. So that's the link that scholars are seeing with Sine. Is that connected to the Sinites and the Bible prophecy with the land of Sinim? So that's important that we speak about that. Before we leave the Far East, there could be something interesting to speak about with the name of the peninsula Korea. So the Korean peninsula, we have two countries now, North Korea, South Korea. Could this name be connected to Syria? This page is speaking about Cord. So it says Cord, also Huru, Karu is the second later name used by ancient Egyptians after using retinue in designating the wider Syrian region where the Semitic-speaking Canaanites lived. And it also says here, it is plausible that Kor is a Middle Egyptian reference to Canaan. So this name not only used for Syria, but it may have also been used for Canaan. So important for our study. Now where it says Huru, this could be speaking about the Horites of the Bible, and on the historical record it could be referring to the Hurrians. And scholars do connect the Hurrians with the Horites. So this is what we said, we may speak indirectly about the Hivites, because in the Bible we don't actually know who the Horites descend from. But in the book of Jasher, it does say that the Horites descend from the Hivites. So Hori being a descendant of Hivi. So that's interesting. So it could be the Horites or the Hivites that could be influencing the naming of Syria. So the Huru or the Karu. But is this name, or has this name, been brought to the Far East with Korea? And there are scholars that, well, I have seen, um, well, I have read at least one scholar that's made this connection. So it's not me saying this. And also Lawrence Austin Waddell, if we read this part, also makes this connection. Now, Kurd, I observed, was the ancient Sumerian and Babylonian name for Syria and Asia Minor, so Syria and Asia Minor, of the Hittites or white Syrians. And it was thus obviously the original of the Syria of the Greeks, softened into Syria by the Romans. So it could be important for our learning, if we think about the Bible verses that we read at the start, that these nations or these peoples were in the Holy Land, and the Israelites were supposed to drive them out completely. So we're just trying to learn as much as we can about these sons of Canaan, so these nations. And we also need to remember as we go forward in this video, these different names for the Hittites, different variations. So we had the Keta or the Kata. So we're going to speak more in this video about the Hittites because they are very important. Well, we're going to learn just how important they have been in history. Those of you who are watching who are coming from more of a traditional background, and I mean that in terms of learning from or following biblical scholarship, might be saying, I thought Ham was connected with Africa. That's why we are trying to learn, trying to dispel ignorance. So we've gone to the Far East to show that Ham is not just connected with Africa. That's not the whole story. But we know Ham has been strongly connected with Africa, so we shouldn't be surprised if we see connections with Canaan, son of Ham, to Africa. Now, this is going to be traditional Ethiopian histories. I'm mindful that we've already done quite a bit of reading, and there's going to be a lot to take in for this video. So I'm not going to read all this out, but just to draw attention to these Ethiopian traditions for descendants of Canaan in these regions, and just drawing attention to the Canaanite tribes. So we have the Arvadites, the Sinites, the Amorites, and we also have the Hammatites. So very interesting. And I also want to read this part at the bottom where it says, according to this historian, that Canaan is the father of the Sudan, northeast Africa, and the Abyssinians. I have seen another researcher speaking about the potential connection of this name Abyssinia to Sini and the Sinites. I don't know if it's true, but it is interesting, especially when we see, according to these Ethiopian histories, the Sinites being connected to this region. So that's interesting. So now we are starting to think more about the connection with Africa and Canaan, and we're going to continue in that direction. We're going to consider further this connection with Canaan, son of Ham, and Africa by speaking about the Amorites. So Amor, son of Canaan. I would like to read from this source, the Hittites, the story of a forgotten empire, regarding the Amorites. And we're just reading the opinion of the scholar, the findings. So it says, It is clear then that the Amorites of Canaan belonged to the same white race as the Libyans of North Africa, and like them preferred the mountains to the hot plains and valleys below. The Libyans themselves belong to a race which can be traced through the peninsula of Spain and the western side of France into the British Isles. Now it is curious that wherever this particular branch of the white race has extended, it has been accompanied by a particular form of cromlech. And we did do a video speaking about this in our playlist, The History of North Africa and the Mediterranean. Were the Amorites of Canaan living in the Atlas Mountains? So came across this mountain range called Amor, the Amor range in the Atlas Mountain system. And the Atlas Mountains are in North Africa, so this mountain range. And we are going to be speaking about Atlantis in this video. So there is thought going into this this video in the direction we're moving. Now the interesting thing in this video is that we came across a source that spoke about a tribe living in Morocco in the Atlas Mountain range called Eight Amor and being connected to the Amorites. So just very interesting, some of these details, because if we think about the meaning of the Amorites, the name Amor, Amuru, it says in Akkadian by the name of Amuru, and in Egypt as Amar, all of which mean Westerners, or those of the West, as does the Hebrew name Amorite. So I think an important distinction would be, how did the Egyptians think of the Amorites when using this name? Because if the Egyptians saw the Amorites as being Westerners, then it could make sense that we're looking towards the west, towards the Atlas mountain range. And remember, we read in this paragraph that it said they preferred the mountains to the hot plains and valleys below. So being a mountain people, it just makes it interesting that you see this Amor range. And also the fact that we had that source in this video about a tribe called Eight Amor being connected to the Amorites. So I hope you're finding this video very interesting. We are moving further west, and in this video we will go further with Atlas and Atlantis. So I hope you finding it interesting and enjoying it so far. We're now going to speak about Canaan's firstborn son, Sidon, the Sidonians, but we're not going to speak about them directly, because when we click on this link for the Sidonians, it actually takes us to the Phoenicians. So the Sidonians being connected to the Phoenicians. Let's go to a map to try and visualize the history that we are presented with for the Phoenicians, with this map showing us that the origin would be the Eastern Mediterranean, and then their influence spreading to the west. But is this the true picture for the Phoenicians? Let's look at a few examples of details, information, sources that could be putting this into doubt or question. So the first thing I'd like to speak about is Cornwall and tin mining. It says, we know that from 2000 BC, tin mining started in Cornwall, initially focusing on alluvial deposits. Let me show you on the map where we are looking for Cornwall. So this part of Great Britain. So very interesting, because if the Phoenicians were getting tin from Britain, and it was as early as 2000 BC, which some people are of the opinion of that was very early, that would throw this map into doubt because it would mess with the timeline. Because there's certain dates that are given for this expansion to the west when these different city-states would be founded by the Phoenicians. But if they were already mining tin in Britain, then it throws this all into question or doubt. And another thing that is very important is what the Greek historians and geographers were saying about the origins for the Phoenicians. We did this when we were exploring the land of Punt, and we have very credible historians, geographers, saying that the origin of the Phoenicians was the Erythraean Sea, so looking towards the Indian Ocean. So we were considering this maritime empire in the Indian Ocean with the Phoenicians from East Africa and the Red Sea, stretching all the way to Indonesia. So have we been presented with a true picture, a true history for the Phoenicians? And they were so influential, or they have been so influential throughout history. How can you have an accurate view of the past if you don't really understand or are not being presented with a true picture for the Phoenicians? So we'll just consider one more, if you want to say like a headline for the Phoenicians. It says, who reached America first, Columbus or the Phoenicians? A replica Phoenician vessel made in Syria is sailing the Atlantic to prove the ancient civilization did it 2,000 years before Columbus. So there's many different theories out there about the different accomplishments of the Phoenicians. We have to be careful that we don't just believe everything we come across, but it does seem that we're not really getting the true picture for the Phoenicians. And why is that? We're going to think outside of the box now. Is this Atlantis hiding in plain sight in the Sahara? A very strange and mysterious structure called the Richat structure. We're going to come back to this sentence. Quite interesting. It says, the famed lost city of Atlantis may have been found in a rather unlikely place, the Sahara Desert. So I'd like to speak about the way it says a rather unlikely place. You may be aware of these videos, become quite famous. The channel Bright Insight, the lost city of Atlantis hidden in plain sight. So if we look at this graphic, we can see what Atlantis may have looked like with the circular nature of the civilization. And then we notice the circular nature of the Richat structure. But we want to focus on this video where this has been located and found, which is the country of Mauritania, West Africa. So keep in mind where this has been found as we now consider the Bible, the point in the Bible history where the earth was divided. So according to Genesis 10:25 and 1 Chronicles 1:19, it was during the time of Peleg that the earth was divided. And I'd like to read this part here. Some creationists interpret this verse to refer to the continent of Pangaea being split into the modern continents. So when I used to read the Bible and I read about Peleg, that in his time the earth was divided, that's what I always pictured. For some reason, I just thought about the earth, the physical earth being divided. But then coming across the book of Jubilees, thinking differently now, because it says, and in the 6th year thereof she bare him a son, and he called his name Peleg. For in the days when he was born, the children of Noah began to divide the earth among themselves. For this reason he called his name Peleg, and they divided it secretly among themselves, and told it to Noah. So this seems more plausible and more likely for the meaning of the name of Peleg. The book of Jubilees tells us how the sons of Noah received portions, and then they divided that amongst their grandchildren. And it gives a lot of details about these portions. So very interesting source. One of our viewers just recently has been speaking to me and saying that we shouldn't use the Book of Jubilees as a credible source because it's not inspired by the Holy Spirit. So the Book of Jubilees is not in most of our Bibles. But I just want to consider this Bible verse where it says, this is 1 Thessalonians 5:21, where we'll read this one. But test all things carefully, so you can recognize what is good. Hold firmly to that which is good. So the Bible says that we should test things and hold on to what is good. So not just believing everything that we come across straight away, which could be important for people watching this video, but to test things. So not to be afraid and just ignore or hide away, but test and then hold on to what is good. And we have been working with the Book of Jubilees for quite a while now on this channel, and it has proven to be reliable. And I'm just speaking in the sense of the section where it speaks about these portions, because that's what we've been working with. So let's focus now on the Hamites, because we want to speak about Canaan. And Ham divided amongst his sons, and the first portion came forth for Cush toward the east, and to the west of him for Mizraim, and to the west of him for Put, and to the west of him, and to the west thereof, on the sea for Canaan. So we want to focus on Canaan. Now, if we go to the footnotes, it says the Atlantic. So this is where it gets interesting, because it's saying that Canaan would be towards the Atlantic. It also says from Libya to the Atlantic. So isn't that interesting if we go back to this map now? This is an edit that I'm adding in after proofing the whole video. I thought that this may be a bit confusing. So I don't know what you're thinking, but if you are thinking, is he saying that the Holy Land is Atlantis or was Atlantis? That's not what we are saying. This is purely a comparison between the story of Canaan, son of Ham, and the Greek god Poseidon. And then it leads to an interesting question at the end. Just for clarification. Have you seen where we could be going with this? I know it might seem strange when you first hear this or come across this. So just to remember some things, that when we clicked on Sidon, son of Canaan, it took us to the Phoenicians. And we saw the Phoenicians were described as a maritime civilization. The Book of Jubilees is saying that the territory of Canaan, his portion, was from Libya to the Atlantic. Now, the strange or the interesting thing is, like we're looking at this, this graphic, could this be Atlantis in West Africa? So now we're thinking about the Atlanteans and Poseidon. So this is where it gets interesting, because the Atlanteans, so Atlantis, it says Atlantis is described as a naval empire. So now we're dealing with a naval people, a naval empire. It says that ruled all western parts of the known world. Now, if you don't know anything about Atlantis, we'll read this little part here. It says, after an ill-fated attempt to conquer ancient Athens, Atlantis falls out of favor with the deities and submerges into the Atlantic Ocean. So that's where most people thought Atlantis should be looked for, the Atlantic Ocean. And there was also great rivalry between Atlantis and Egypt, according to the legends. But in this mythology, it actually speaks about how the gods divided the earth. So it says here, in the division of the earth, Poseidon obtained as his portion the island of Atlantis, and there he begat children whose mother was a mortal. So what we're considering is something called euhemerism. I just want to go to the source that mentions it. The source is all about Atlantis. The kings of Atlantis become the gods of the Greeks. So it says, the history of Atlantis is the key of the Greek mythology. There can be no question that these gods of Greece were human beings. So that's what we are considering. So it's saying that Poseidon, and Poseidon is one of the famous gods of the Olympians, king of the sea, god of the sea, famous for storms, earthquakes, and his trident. So in this mythology, it's saying that Poseidon received the portion or the island of Atlantis. So we're thinking the Atlantic because of his son Atlas, who was supposed to be the first king of Atlantis. And remember, we've already mentioned the Atlas mountain range in North Africa. But the Book of Jubilees is saying that the portion of Canaan was from Libya to the Atlantic. And Canaan is connected to a maritime civilization, the way Poseidon is being connected to the Atlanteans, and they're also being described as a naval empire. So remember, we are still thinking about that Bible verse that we must test things before we just accept them. So keeping that in mind still, but in this mythology, there is a descendant of Poseidon called Agenor. So a direct descendant, but there is potentially another father given for Agenor. But it says that Agenor was the king of Tyre or Sidon, a member of the Phoenician royal family. So it's saying that the Phoenician royal family is connected to Poseidon. And we already learned in this video about how Canaan, son of Ham, is being connected to the Phoenicians. So this is also just something quite strange when you come across it. I came across the scholar who says the Phoenician name of Agenor was Canas or Cana, which was the same as Canaan. And upon these facts, he built the hypothesis that Agenor or Canas was the same as Canaan in the book of Moses. So, don't know what you make about this. Let me know what you think about this connection. It's very interesting. Is there a connection between the Atlanteans and the Phoenicians? If you are thinking that this all sounds very interesting, but how does this shine a light on the Holy Land? I hope this part starts to bring things together for this video. Here we are looking at a depiction of a very famous battle. We're going to speak about the Battle of Kadesh, part of the second Syrian campaign of Ramesses II. Major rivalry between Egypt and the Hittite Empire, and they say that this battle could have been the largest chariot battle ever fought, involving 5,000 to 6,000 chariots. So the Hittites were one of the superpowers of this period. But how does this make sense? Because we started by reading the Bible verses of the Israelite conquest of Canaan. So the Israelites would have defeated the Hittites. So how could they still be a superpower fighting against the Egyptians for control of Syria? So this could be important. This is a source speaking about the Hittites. It says, it speaks of two classes of Hittites, those of southern Palestine and those of the north beyond the Promised Land. So this could be important that we're aware of this. Hittites in the Holy Land, but then also, I'm going to say branch, a northern branch of the Hittites. So if we think about this verse from the book of Judges, chapter 3, the Israelites lived among the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and Jebusites. They took their daughters in marriage and gave their own daughters to their sons and served their gods. So the Israelites were supposed to drive out the Canaanites completely. But here we see that they didn't do that, and now living amongst them and intermarrying, which is leading them to serve other gods. But this is Israelites living among the Hittites. This could be what it's speaking about with the southern branch. But the northern branch, this could be what we're reading about, still remaining a major power, one of the superpowers, fighting against Egypt for control of Syria. The Hittite Empire in the myth of the Atlantis. This is a very interesting perspective that we came across. I'd like to go down to point number 6 to read. The Atlantis was an empire which was very strong and dangerous for Greece and Egypt. It might be only the Hittite Empire. The War of Atlantis against Greece and Egypt resembles the 13th century BC conflicts of the Hittite Empire. And we mentioned one of these conflicts with the Battle of Kadesh. Very interesting perspective. To try to put this into context, remember we said that in these legends there was a major rivalry between Atlantis and Egypt. Now this researcher is saying, if we think about this historically, it can only be the Hittite Empire. So if we go to a map to think about this, we're considering the Hittite Empire. Well, let me actually clarify. I'm not sure exactly how that researcher sees this, so this is my interpretation. He's comparing the Atlantean rivalry with Egypt. Could it be the Hittites against Egypt? But we see the Atlantic Sea, and here we see Atlas for the Atlas mountain range, which is why I said it seems strange to have that sentence that we're surprised that there could be, that the, let's say the Richat structure in Mauritania, surprised that this could be where Atlantis may have been, to discover it here. But wouldn't this be one of the first regions you'd be looking when we have the Atlantic Ocean or the Atlantic Sea, and we have the Atlas mountain range, and some of the mythology says that Atlas was king of the Maori, king of Mauritania. So you would think you would be looking in this region if you want to find Atlantis. So that's why I thought that sentence was a little bit strange. But considering the Hittite Empire as an Atlantean empire, and we're also considering other things that we've spoken about with the Amorites, how the meaning of the name could be Westerners or to the west, but how far to the west were the Amorites? And in terms of the Holy Land, we said, should we be looking for a large land to the south? Now, with this rivalry between Egypt and the Hittites fighting for domination and control of Syria, Syria leads you into the Holy Land. So maybe now you can start to see how this video is coming together. Looking for a large land in the south, and the Hittites and Egypt fighting against each other for control and domination of this region or this land. Where were they fighting? Is there any evidence for an Atlantean-based Hittite empire? This is where we said that we need to remember the different variations for the name Heth and Hittite. So remember the Egyptians referred to the Hittites as Ketsa, Kitsa, or Katsa. In our playlist, Exploring the Celtic World, we did quite a few videos on the Hittites. This one was called From Britain to India to China. Who were the Hittites from the Bible? So we started in the Far East with China. But what about from Britain to India? if we try explain this using the source, the Phoenician origin of the Britons, Scots, and Anglo-Saxons, we'll read from this part here. I then observed that the old ruling race of Asia Minor and Syria Phoenicia from immemorial time were the great imperial, highly civilized, ancient people generally known as Hittites, but who also called themselves Kati or Kati, which is the self-same title by which the early Briton kings of the pre-Roman period called themselves and their race, and stamped it upon the Briton coins, so-called Kati coins of early Britain. So now we're thinking about Ketza, Kitsi, Katza. So it's saying that the Hittites were ruling over Britain in the pre-Roman times. And I want to show you how the scholar links this to India. Just jump down to page, I think it's page 39. It's very interesting for trying to understand the history behind this. Just trying to see, might have gone past it already. Okay, it was here. Okay, I found it. I found that the father of the first historical Aryan king of India, as recorded in the Mahabharata epic and Indian Buddhist history, was the last historical king of the Hittites in Asia Minor. So the author of this book is speaking about when the Hittite power was broken. Was there a migration to India of this royal line? And it links to what we were speaking about with the Syria and the Hudu and the Kadu. We read that, I think it was here, about Syria. Could it be the same as Korea? And the scholar links this to the Kuru. This is a kingdom that was in India, in the northern region of India. So Kuru was a Vedic Indo-Aryan tribal union in northern Iron Age India. So very fascinating because it links Britain to India to China, and India has also been called Bharat. And that scholar links that name to the Britons. So Briton, Bharat. We did some other interesting videos, the Celtic Amazigh-Berber connection, the Hittite Empire discussion, and another very interesting video, if you're interested to know more about this with the Hittites. How could the Hittites become forgotten? Are they really the Alans, Aryans, the Iron people? Because even Sir Isaac Newton speaks about this. This will be the last thing for this part. According to Sir Isaac Newton, when he sees Catalan, so this is a region of Spain, Catalonia, the Catalans, he saw it as the Cati Alans. So we're thinking about the Hittites, and this also makes it interesting when you're thinking on that line. When we see the Alans, I read one of these scholars saying, could this be connected to Elon the Hittite? In the Bible, it tells us about Elon the Hittite. So is that connected to the Alans? We're not going to read too much from here because I think we've done a lot for this video, but it says, speaking about the Catalans, who were half Cati and half Alans, And I wanted to read the part where it says, so far we see that, according to these sources, the Catalans were not Gallic powers, but Tartars. So the Tartars. And it also says, 19th and 20th century studies conclude that the Catti, or Catti, also Hatti, were the Hittites cited in the Bible. So there have been scholars connecting the Catti with the Hittites. And the other video that we did trying to follow the Cat people, the Catti, took us to Scotland and Germany. So very interesting for the Hittites and this theory about an Atlantean-based Hittite empire. We're going to finish with some final thoughts. It's difficult to say everything you want to say in one video. You do try to predict or think about criticisms that could come your way. Have you made any mistakes? So for example, we spoke about the potential Phoenician maritime empire in the Indian Ocean, but then we also showed this headline, who reached America first, Columbus or the Phoenicians? So people might say, are you not contradicting yourself? Is it the Indian Ocean, or is it the Phoenicians reaching the Americas? And I was thinking that during the video, I didn't actually show you the ship, the image that they built to test this theory, this experiment. So it was quite interesting that I actually watched this video for the first time while making this video from the channel Bright Insights. It's called Proof a Mysterious Lost Ancient Global Civilization Spanned Virtually the Entire Planet. It's quite interesting watching this one and also considering what we speaking about in this video. If you think about all these X's that he's got on the map, thinking about that, the potential for a maritime empire in the Indian Ocean with the Phoenicians reaching from the Horn of Africa to Indonesia, and also that the Atlantean Empire was said to rule all the regions of the West. But then we were speaking about, are the Phoenicians actually connected to the Atlanteans? So I'm not saying that I agree with everything that Bright Insight puts out, but if you watch that video, let me know what you think, if it could make sense and that we're not actually contradicting ourselves. We said we're going to finish the video with this map, speaking about Bible prophecy and the end times. And I've made it a bit smaller so you can see the colors if you were a bit confused about what the colors meant. We're going to read a different Bible verse from the book of Matthew, chapter 24. But he that shall endure unto the end, the same shall be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come. So at different points in history, some may have said, the end can't come yet because the gospel of the kingdom hasn't reached to all the nations. But now we know that saying, time is of the essence, because can we say that now in our time? It's been difficult to put this video together, thinking about how to present it and what to say. We haven't tried to say this is where we believe the Holy Land is, but putting things forward, bringing things out that we've learned and uncovered. And if just one of them was to stick, for example, the Amorites or the Hittites or the Phoenicians, to show that it doesn't seem that we are being presented with a true picture for our history. And should we be willing to talk to each other about this and discuss, to really think about the Holy Land? So it's more of an invitation And I know that this can be a very difficult thing depending where you are at, because it's about our faith, our beliefs, and it can be very difficult. So this video may be received in different ways by, well, depending on where you're at. So you may have been inspired, you may feel confused, but wherever you are at, we can be hopeful and have consolation when we think about this final verse we're going to read, which will also explain the graphic for the video. This is Joel 3:16. The Lord also shall roar out of Zion, and utter his voice from Jerusalem, and the heavens and the earth shall shake, but the Lord will be the hope of his people, and the strength of the children of Israel. So we will know, because when the roar goes out of Zion, then we're going to know, and we'll have the answer. Thank you for watching this video, and hopefully we'll see you in another one.